The galaxy is vast, filled with countless civilizations. For centuries, Earth was nothing but a forgotten speck, a planet too primitive to bother with. To the advanced empires out there, humanity seemed insignificant. Earth was seen as a curiosity, quaint and naive, far behind in technology and power. The Tar Dominion was one of those advanced races. They were conquerors, proud of their sprawling empire. They enslaved entire planets, harvesting their resources, leaving nothing but remnants of once vibrant worlds. To them, Earth was just another unworthy target, a weak society that would crumble at the mere sight of their power. The Tar mocked the humans, their simplicity, their outdated technology. The belief was simple: Earth had no chance. The Tar would descend, and humanity would be forced to kneel, just like the others before them. High in the meeting halls of the Tar Dominion, their generals spoke about Earth with scorn. They laughed at the thought of human resistance. "These Earthlings," said one general, his voice dripping with disdain. "They still use combustion engines for transport. It will be like taking candy from an infant." Overlord Zalgar, a towering figure with glowing eyes and an air of arrogance, decided it was time to end Earth's autonomy. They would strip its resources, enslave its people, and leave the planet barren. "Prepare the invasion fleet," he commanded. "This will be quick." With their orders given, the Tar invasion began. Across Earth's skies, alien vessels appeared, blotting out the sun. The sight was terrifying: massive ships, sleek and menacing, descending upon cities with overwhelming power. Humanity tried to mount a defense, but the Tar technology was centuries ahead. Earth's missiles were swatted aside like annoying flies. Communications crumbled, power grids failed. Panic spread among the population. For the Tar, this was amusing. They watched from their command posts as their troops moved in, ready to claim Earth as their own. They saw humans running, hiding, grasping at any shred of hope they could find. To the Tar, this confirmed their belief: humanity was weak, a species on the verge of its inevitable subjugation. Yet, in the chaos, there were whispers of something different. Among the ruins, hidden from the alien invaders, shadowy figures observed the unfolding destruction. Eyes cold and calculating, these figures were not panicking, they were waiting. They were analyzing every move the Tar made, every tactical flaw. They were Earth's secret weapon, a unit created not for show but for this exact moment. The Tar didn't know that the true strength of Earth was not in numbers or outdated military hardware. Humanity's greatest power lay in resilience, in adaptability, in their ability to rise when everyone expected them to fall. The Tar were about to find out that they hadn't invaded a planet of sheep. Hidden beneath the surface, behind the panicking facade, there lay a group forged for this very threat, a group known only as Hades. And Hades was ready. The Tar thought they had won. Cities lay in ruins, their forces controlled vital locations across the planet. The Earth seemed to be theirs, with no meaningful resistance to stand in their way. But they were wrong. The shadows moved, and from them, humanity's true defenders emerged, the Hades unit. This was no ordinary military. Hades was the culmination of decades of preparation, training, and knowledge passed down to defend Earth from the threats beyond the stars. This was humanity's ace, hidden in plain sight until it was finally time to strike. Commander Marcus Kane, a man known for his unbreakable will, was the leader of Hades. He and his team of elite soldiers had trained for years for a scenario exactly like this one. They had studied alien technology, learned about possible invasion tactics, and prepared themselves to exploit any weakness, no matter how small. Now, with Earth under siege, it was their time to prove themselves. While the Tar generals gloated in their temporary success, Hades began their counterattack. Their first strike was swift and brutal. In the darkness of night, they moved silently through the ruins of a once thriving city. A Tar battalion was stationed there, expecting no opposition. Hades approached unseen. Commander Kane, his eyes set with focus, led the team in complete silence, each member moving with purpose. They struck like a lightning storm. Blades, bullets, stealth takedowns, the Tar soldiers never saw it coming. In minutes, an entire battalion vanished, leaving behind only silence and confusion. The Tar command received fragmented reports of their soldiers disappearing without a trace. To them, it made no sense. How could these primitive humans have such precision, such capability? But the Tar arrogance was unshaken. They labeled Hades as a minor insurgency, assuming their technological superiority would eventually crush this resistance. They hadn't yet realized that Hades was not just a unit, they were the embodiment of humanity's fighting spirit. Hades used Earth itself as their weapon. Dense urban landscapes, sprawling forests, winding mountains, these became their allies. They led Tar units into traps, setting off explosives that sent their advanced vehicles crumbling. They disrupted supply lines, cut communications, and dismantled alien installations with the kind of tactical brilliance that comes only from a desperate will to survive. The Tar, used to conquering weak and passive planets, had no response for this kind of warfare. It was unfamiliar, messy, chaotic, full of passion and cunning. Commander Kane had a plan, one that the Tar couldn't comprehend. Instead of fighting head-on, Hades stayed in the shadows. They waited, watched, then struck when the Tar least expected it. They didn't need large numbers or fancy tech. They used their surroundings, exploiting every mistake the Tar made. Earth wasn't just a battlefield, it was a weapon, a terrain that Hades knew intimately and used to perfection. The Tar forces, once arrogant and confident, began to crumble under the pressure. Reports flowed in of entire platoons disappearing overnight, of supply convoys getting destroyed, of critical points being lost. The Tar soldiers began to whisper among themselves stories of ghost warriors who appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as quickly. It was the beginning of fear, a fear that was spreading like wildfire. This was not supposed to happen. Earth was supposed to be an easy conquest, a straightforward addition to the Dominion. Instead, they found themselves fighting against an enemy that was relentless, unpredictable, and terrifying. Overlord Zalgar was furious. He demanded that more forces be sent down to eliminate these so-called Hades warriors. He believed in the strength of his empire, in their weapons and their armor, in their ships and numbers. He saw humanity as a nuisance, still refusing to accept them as a legitimate threat. But as more Tar forces vanished, even his confidence began to waver. For the humans, Hades became a symbol of hope. People who had been hiding, afraid and powerless, began to see glimpses of their victories. They saw the Tar soldiers retreating, struggling, losing ground. Civilians began to aid Hades in whatever way they could, sabotaging alien machinery, providing intelligence, anything to help push back the invaders. This was what Hades needed, the unity of their people. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity, for everything they held dear. Hades was no longer just a military unit. They had become a movement, a representation of everything the Tar had underestimated. They were not a collection of frightened creatures. They were resilient, resourceful, and most importantly, they were human. And that made them unpredictable, dangerous, and absolutely unwilling to surrender. Commander Marcus Kane, standing on the ruins of a city block, looked up at the alien ships overhead. His expression was calm, determined. "They thought we were weak," he said quietly to his team. "They thought this would be easy. Let's show them what humanity is really made of." And with that, Hades moved again, ready to remind the Tar of one simple fact: Earth would never fall without a fight. The Tar had initially dismissed Hades as a small nuisance, but now, they were starting to understand their mistake. Their forces on Earth had taken a significant hit. Their war machines, once symbols of overwhelming dominance, were now struggling to keep up. Overlord Zalgar, determined not to lose face, made a decision: he would escalate. He ordered more war machines, advanced weapons, and additional troops to descend upon Earth. This was no longer a simple invasion, it had become a battle to maintain the reputation of the Tar Dominion. Earth had to fall, and Hades had to be eradicated. The Tar's increased forces swept across cities, leveling whatever resistance they could find. They deployed massive war machines designed for one purpose: total annihilation. Their ships cast dark shadows over the land, creating a sense of impending doom. But Hades was far from defeated. To Commander Kane and his team, this was exactly what they had trained for. They had planned for escalation, and they were ready. They knew the Taurus' strength lay in their technology, but their weakness lay in their arrogance and lack of understanding of the terrain they fought on. Kane devised a strategy to turn the Taurus' strengths into weaknesses. He led his team through dense forests, across jagged mountain paths, and into labyrinthine urban ruins. Hades used the terrain to their advantage, always staying one step ahead. The Taurus' advanced war machines struggled in the tight, uneven spaces where they were led. Massive tanks meant for open battlefields found themselves unable to maneuver through narrow city streets. The Hades soldiers would strike, vanish, and reappear elsewhere, leaving the Tar disoriented and frustrated. Every attack was calculated to draw the invaders deeper into traps, cutting off their escape, and dismantling their forces one piece at a time. The Tar morale began to crumble. Their soldiers, once confident in their victory, were now shaken. They spoke in hushed tones of Hades, of how they would appear out of nowhere, strike with lethal precision, and disappear before anyone could react. Hades had become a legend among them, a force they couldn't comprehend. The fear was palpable. The Tar had expected an easy conquest, but now they were faced with an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Reports of Hades' attacks became more frequent, and the casualties mounted. For every battalion the Tar deployed, Hades had a response, swift, brutal, and effective. Back in the Tar command centers, confusion reigned. Overlord Zalgar was furious, unwilling to admit that he had underestimated humanity. He demanded results, pushing his generals to find a way to eliminate Hades. But they were out of their element. The Tar were used to overwhelming their enemies with brute force. They had no experience with the kind of guerrilla warfare Hades employed. They struggled to adapt, and each attempt to outmaneuver the humans only led them deeper into Kane's traps. Earth was becoming a nightmare, a place where shadows held danger, where every step could lead to an ambush. As the Taurus' desperation grew, so did humanity's resolve. The people of Earth, once cowering in fear, began to find hope. They watched as the invaders stumbled, as their mighty war machines were brought down by the cunning and bravery of Hades. Civilians began to rise up, no longer passive observers of their fate. They worked in secret, providing intelligence to Hades, sabotaging Tar equipment, and spreading misinformation to confuse the invaders. This was no longer just Hades' fight, it was Earth's fight. In the midst of this chaos, Commander Marcus Kane led his team with unyielding determination. He knew that the key to victory was not to match the Tar in power but to use their arrogance against them. He focused on dismantling their supply lines, striking at their weakest points, and cutting off their ability to regroup. Kane understood that the Tar had never faced an enemy like humanity. They were used to passive planets, not a species that would fight back with everything it had, that would turn every piece of land, every building, every shadow into a weapon. The Tar, who had once mocked Earth, now found themselves on the defensive. Their soldiers, once proud and fearless, were now plagued by anxiety, always looking over their shoulders, unsure where the next attack would come from. Hades had become the monster in the dark, the thing that haunted their every move. This was not the battle they had expected. They had come to Earth to dominate, but now they were fighting to survive. The Tar generals, pressured by Zalgar's demands for a decisive victory, ordered their forces to regroup, to crush the human resistance with overwhelming numbers. But Hades was ready. Kane had anticipated this move. He knew that the Taurus' response to resistance was always the same: more troops, more weapons, more firepower. And he knew how to turn that against them. He set the stage for a large-scale ambush, using the terrain to funnel the Tar forces into a narrow canyon. It was there that Hades struck, using explosives planted in advance to bring the walls down, trapping the Taurus' heavy units and cutting off their retreat. It was a massacre, and it sent a clear message: Earth was not falling without a fight. For the first time, Overlord Zalgar began to question his decision. He had never imagined that a species as primitive as humanity could pose such a threat. He had never imagined that Earth would be anything more than a quick conquest. But now, with his forces dwindling and his reputation on the line, he was forced to confront the reality. humanity was unlike any enemy the Tar had faced before. They were relentless, resourceful, and utterly unwilling to surrender. The tide was turning. The Tar, who had once been so confident, now faced a harsh truth: Earth was not just another conquest. It was a battleground where their strength and technology meant nothing against the will of a united people. Hades had shown them that humanity was not weak, not insignificant. They were fighters, survivors, and they would not be crushed. Commander Kane, watching the aftermath of the ambush, knew that the fight was far from over. But he also knew that the Tar were breaking. Their arrogance had been their undoing, and now they were paying the price. With each battle, Hades grew stronger, and humanity's hope burned brighter. This was no longer a war of technology versus primitive weapons, this was a war of wills. And Kane was determined that humanity's will would not be broken. Overlord Zalgar, facing mounting failures on Earth, knew that the situation was spiraling out of control. The humans, whom he had once dismissed, had shattered his forces' morale and turned what was supposed to be a simple conquest into a desperate struggle. In a bid to regain control, Zalgar retreated to his heavily fortified flagship, hovering in Earth's orbit, a symbol of the Tar's last stronghold. From there, he intended to crush the resistance once and for all. The order went out: every remaining resource was to be used in one final assault to bring the planet to its knees. Commander Marcus Kane, watching the situation from below, saw this as their opportunity. The Tar were reeling, their forces on the ground scattered and leaderless. The only thing holding the invasion together was Zalgar, and Kane knew that if they could strike the flagship, they could bring an end to the invasion. The plan was risky, almost impossible, but Hades was used to impossible odds. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment to take the fight directly to the heart of the enemy. Under cover of darkness, Hades launched their final assault. Stealth pods ascended through the atmosphere, avoiding detection from the Tar sensors. They latched onto the hull of Zalgar's flagship, and the team moved inside with purpose. Silence was their weapon. They moved through the halls, eliminating guards without a sound, placing explosives, sabotaging key systems. The ship, once the safest place in Zalgar's eyes, had become a battleground. The Tar crew was caught off guard, unsure where the attackers were or how many there might be. Panic spread. Commander Kane led his team straight to the control center, where Overlord Zalgar waited. The two met face to face. Zalgar, towering and armed with the finest Tar weaponry, looked at Kane with disdain. To him, this human was an anomaly, a mistake that needed correcting. But Kane was unafraid. He had faced the worst of the galaxy, fought in the darkest of battles, and he knew that this was the moment that defined everything. For humanity, for Earth, for freedom, there was no backing down. The battle between Kane and Zalgar was swift and brutal. Zalgar fought with all the strength and fury of his kind, but Kane was relentless. Every move was calculated, every strike precise. Kane knew he couldn't match Zalgar's physical strength, but he didn't need to. He used his agility, his training, and his determination. It was a clash of raw power against human resilience. And in the end, it was Kane who stood victorious. Zalgar, once so confident, so assured of his dominance, fell. With his fall, the heart of the Tar invasion crumbled. With Zalgar defeated, the explosives planted throughout the flagship were triggered. The ship shook violently as systems failed, and alarms blared. Kane gave the order, and Hades made their escape, retreating to the stealth pods and launching away as the flagship began to disintegrate. From the surface of Earth, the sight was spectacular, the once dominant Tar vessel, a symbol of their power, breaking apart in the sky, its pieces burning up as they fell. It was a clear message to every Tar soldier still on the planet: their leader was gone, their invasion had failed. Across Earth, the remaining Tar forces, now leaderless and without direction, began to surrender. They had come expecting an easy conquest, but instead, they had faced a nightmare. Humanity had refused to bow, had refused to be broken. The Tar soldiers laid down their arms, realizing that their superior technology and numbers were useless against the sheer determination of those they had sought to conquer. Hades, once just a shadow unit, emerged as heroes, the defenders of a united Earth. The people of Earth, who had watched in fear as their world was invaded, now rose in triumph. Civilians who had cowered in shelters, who had lost their homes and families, began to rebuild, driven by the example set by Cain and his team. The Tar invasion had brought destruction, but it had also ignited something in humanity, a determination to survive, to fight back, and to protect what was theirs. In the aftermath, Commander Marcus Kane stood with his team, looking out over the ruins of what had once been a battlefield. The fight had been brutal, the losses immense, but they had won. Not just for themselves, but for every human who had been mocked, who had been seen as weak. They had shown the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Word of the Tar defeat spread beyond Earth, reaching the ears of other alien empires. The Tar, once feared conquerors, had been brought down by a species they had deemed unworthy. It was a shock to the galactic community, a reminder that there were still things in the universe that couldn't be easily quantified or conquered, like the human spirit. The message was clear: humanity was not to be taken lightly. They might not have the advanced technology, or the vast armies of other empires, but they had something far more powerful: the will to fight for their survival. As the sun set on a battered, but victorious Earth, Cain knew that this was not the end. There would be other threats, other challenges that would come their way. But he also knew that as long as humanity stood together, as long as they had the courage to fight for their future, they would prevail. Hades had shown what was possible when the odds were stacked against them, and now, the entire galaxy knew it too. Humanity had faced the darkness, and they had emerged stronger. Cain turned to his team, a rare smile crossing his face. They had done what no one thought possible. They had faced an empire, and they had won. And now, as they looked to the stars, they knew that Earth was ready, ready to defend, ready to thrive, and ready to face whatever came next.